Maybe you thought this was going to be a 4th of July video, and while I don't want to disappoint, I do want to explore some of the lesser-known holidays. Whether or not they're really official doesn't matter in the end. July 3rd is apparently Compliment Your Mirror Day, with the idea being that we can benefit from taking time to compliment and encourage ourselves. However, mirrors can have a darker side, and show us things we'd prefer not to see. Here are 3 stories about experiences that forced people to reflect on what happened. Story 1. This happened a few years ago now, and it still freaks me out to think about it. For context, I was attending a professional development conference from out of town, and I'd driven in the night before to get set up in the hotel. There were a few things I'd need to do before tomorrow, including running through my presentation a few times, as well as responding to a few emails. I won't go into the actual content of what the conference was about, but for this story, it doesn't really matter. What does matter is that as I was walking into the lobby of the hotel, I caught a glimpse of a man sitting on one of the benches. He looked young, like in his 20s, and he was skinny. The man was clean-shaven and wore a collared shirt and cargo pants. He didn't seem to be there with anyone. I wouldn't have cared to make these observations were it not for the fact that the man stared right at me from the moment I walked through the doors. At first I thought I knew him from somewhere, but I couldn't imagine where. I'm also not a prominent member of my field, so I highly doubt he would have somehow known who I was. As I passed closer by him on my way to the front desk, I considered going up to him and asking if we knew each other, but maybe because his stare didn't seem particularly nice, I didn't do that. Instead, I just checked in and walked back out so I could pull my car around closer to the entrance by my room. I almost winced when I saw the man still staring at me. After that, I stayed in my room for a few hours, going over what I needed to and eating some of the snacks I'd brought. Then I left the hotel to go to a restaurant I'd passed by on the way there. I enjoyed the food, and afterwards I decided to just drive around for a while and explore the city. I also got ice cream at a Baskin-Robbins. When I got back to the hotel, it was around 8:30, and I had one more round of preparation planned before either heading to bed or hitting up the pool or exercise room. I parked near where I'd parked earlier and used my key card to open the outside door. My room was on the 3rd floor, so I took the stairs. I didn't see anyone on the way back to my room. When I got inside, I turned on the lights and shut the door behind me. Then I used the bathroom. Now here's where things started to get creepy, or at least creepier than when that man stared at me in the lobby. When I walked to get different clothes out of my suitcase, which I'd put by the bed, it seemed like it was in a slightly different spot. Like, yeah, it was definitely still by the bedside table, but whereas I thought I had pushed it right up against the table, it was now a few inches away. The rest of my items, including my backpack, laptop, and snacks, didn't appear to have moved. I opened my suitcase and went through my clothes. Everything seemed to be where it had been before. Ultimately, I chalked it up to me misremembering how things had been placed, but why I would have even picked up on the placement in the first place, I didn't know. An hour later, I was satisfied with how things were going, so I decided to explore the pool and hot tub. Ever since I was a kid, I really enjoyed staying at hotels, and though it might sound childish, I always made it a point to visit the pool. I put on my swimming trunks and shirt, and took out my keycard, leaving my phone and everything else in the room. I probably spent around 40 minutes or so in the pool/hot tub/exercise room area, and after that I was pretty tired. I got back to my hotel room, closed and deadbolted the door, and then hopped into the shower. Afterwards I went over to my suitcase, and again, something struck me as odd. It seemed like it was pulled slightly closer to the bed. I wouldn't have noticed that detail if it were not for feeling ever so slightly cramped as I walked in front of it. Like before, I did a quick mental take of everything else in the room. Nothing seemed out of place. Everything in my suitcase seemed to be in the right spot. At this point I was more weirded out, so I did a thorough check of the entire room, which included looking under my bed, in the closets, and in the cabinets in the bathroom. Absolutely nothing else stuck out to me. I was like 90% sure that my suitcase really had been moved, but I also had no good explanation. Did someone somehow really sneak into my room 2 separate times, only to move my suitcase? I just then connected my observations of the suitcase to the man I had seen walking in, and latched onto that thought. But that still didn't seem likely. Ultimately, I was able to just go to bed, partly due to the sense of security I had from deadbolting the door. The next day when I woke up, I got dressed in my business attire and went downstairs to eat the complimentary breakfast. I didn't know anyone else attending this conference, but I tried to network a bit. After that, I went back upstairs to get my laptop and a few other items. But this is where everything went down. I was just about to walk out of the door when I decided to check my appearance one last time and give myself a pep talk. I leaned on the bathroom counter towards the mirror as I examined my face, and I started saying something generic like, "You got this." But then straight out of a horror movie cliche, I caught a glimpse of a face peeking out of the closet in the bathroom. My blood ran cold, and I froze. In that moment, I was extremely fortunate, as I don't think that man realized I noticed him, and I could figure out what to do. I decided to play it off like I was still getting ready, and told my reflection, "You're gonna do great." Then I calmly walked out into the little hallway, grabbed my backpack, and opened and closed the door. Once I got outside, I ran down the stairs, my adrenaline pumping. I went to the front desk and explained to the front desk staff that there was an intruder in my hotel room. The lady immediately radioed security, and a moment later I and 2 guards walked back upstairs. They told me to stand back as they opened the door and called out for the man to come outside. We didn't hear anything, so the security guards went into my room. They checked everywhere, but that man was gone. Fortunately, he didn't take any of my stuff. A few things followed this. I got my belongings, and the guards accompanied me back downstairs. By then, a manager had arrived and apologized profusely about what happened. A cop was there too, and we walked over to a back area where I gave a statement. Next, we reviewed the security camera footage, and here's where things got even stranger. While there wasn't a camera pointed directly at my room, there was one looking down the hallway. That man did indeed sneak into and out of my room multiple times, including the last time he entered, which was a few minutes after I went down to eat breakfast. He came out about 30 seconds after the final time that I noticed him and left. The footage from the lobby and exterior cameras saw the man just walk out through the lobby and down the block, never to be seen again. The manager told me my stay would be refunded and offered to upgrade my room and provide complimentary room service. Even though I was terrified right after this happened, I'd had a chance to calm down. And seeing that man leave the building and walk away was reassuring. The manager also said that they'd be on the lookout for him if he returned. I decided to stay for the rest of the conference, and though I'd missed giving my presentation, I was able to give it the next morning. During the conference and on the drive back home, questions kept swirling in my mind. Mostly, who the hell was that man? Did he know me from somewhere? And if not, why did he choose me? Our main theory about how he broke in was that he had gotten a master key from someone, since his appearance didn't match that of any current or former employee. Therefore, he probably could have snuck into any room whatsoever. But that still leaves the question of how he knew what room I was staying in. The footage didn't show him tailing me up to my room, so he must have overheard me when I was checking in. Ultimately, I'll never know, but in the way back of my mind, I always expect him to show up again when I least expect it. Story 2. This happened to me and my friend Cynthia when we were juniors in high school, and it is hands down the scariest thing to have happened to us. We lived in the suburbs, and our town had a rather large shopping mall where we'd hang out on weekends. A lot of times we'd go with more people in our group, but on this particular Saturday it was just me and Cynthia. We'd usually just walk around the upper and lower levels, popping into several of the stores, and then visit the food court and possibly see a movie. That's what we did this time, and about halfway through our stroll we came to the store that sold vanity mirrors. Cynthia and I never bought anything here, but we still loved to go in there and joke around, pretending we were celebrities. When we walked in, there wasn't anyone at the little front desk they had, which wasn't unusual. After all, who could shoplift a big mirror? The store was on the bigger side for this particular mall, and parts of it were dimly lit in order to emphasize the light coming from the vanities. There was a front part and a back part to the store, with one long walkway winding kind of like a maze with the mirrors as sides. Maybe like an IKEA. Cynthia and I were in the back part, close to the wall that separated the two sides. I remember that Cynthia just stuck her face into the mirror I was looking at and told me she loved me when her expression quickly changed. A moment later, I turned my head and saw what she saw. Standing in a shadowy area between two mirrors near the back wall of the store was a man. When we saw him, he stepped out and slowly walked towards us. We got a better look at him, and he looked like he was in his late 30s. He was rather skinny, had longer hair, and had a bit of stubble on his face. He was wearing a business casual shirt and cargo pants. Cynthia and I were both creeped out immediately, and I laughed nervously as the man approached us. At first he didn't say anything, but then he stuck out his hand and introduced himself as Michael. Neither of us wanted to shake his hand, so we just continued to laugh nervously. I asked him if he worked at the store, but then Michael, or whatever his name was, told us he didn't. Instead, he said he was just passing through, but then noticed two gorgeous young ladies, as if we weren't creeped out before. Somehow I managed to look the man in the eye, put on a smile, and tell him we were already taken. Michael didn't seem to care, as he told us our boyfriends wouldn't have to know. I really didn't like the implication, and I took Cynthia's arm and announced that we needed to leave. We turned around and started walking back the way we came, since Michael was in front of us on the little path. My heart sank when I noticed he started following us. I wanted to run, and I'm sure Cynthia wanted to do the same. But we tried to keep walking so as to not seem scared. The whole time we were in the store, the guy was literally like 10 feet behind us. We were praying that Michael wouldn't follow us out of the store, but to our horror he did. We walked another 20 feet, and then I stopped. I'm not a super confrontational person, but in that situation, the adrenaline in my veins caused me to look directly at him and tell him sternly to leave us alone. Michael stopped and just looked at us with a very creepy smile on his face. I was still holding Cynthia's arm and could tell she was terrified as well. We did a half walking / backing away, all the while Michael and I locking to each other's gaze. He didn't appear to follow us after that and eventually disappeared into the crowd. Without speaking a word, Cynthia and I knew our trip was officially over, and we continued walking back to my car. We were actually close to the entrance where we came in, but of course we didn't want to go straight there. Instead, we walked through the JCPenney's, which had two entrances into the mall area. It still appeared that Michael wasn't following us, so we finally went back out through the main entrance, all the while paranoid that he'd show up around the corner. That said, I didn't actually expect it to happen, so I was completely unprepared when it did. We just walked outside the second set of sliding doors when I caught a glimpse of Michael in my peripheral vision. He was leaning on the wall looking forward, but when he saw us, he immediately turned towards us and smiled. Then he got up and started slowly walking in our direction. This time Cynthia and I just booked it. I was parked about 50 yards away, and when we got in, I locked the doors and frantically put the key in the ignition. I almost choked when Cynthia turned and screamed. Michael was standing right behind our car, and then raised his hand and put it on the window. There was a car in front of us, so we couldn't pull forward, meaning he was blocking our exit. I didn't care at this point. I rolled down my window, screamed at him to get the F away or I'd run him over, and slowly started backing up. Michael jumped out of the way as I rolled up my window. That creep passed right by my window as I made my way out, and I stared right at his gross, ugly face. We didn't say anything to each other, but he was still smiling, and as we drove off, I flipped him the bird. This whole time, Cynthia and I hadn't said much to each other, and on the way back to her house, we didn't say much either. I parked on her driveway and we went inside to her room, and only then did we discuss what happened. Ultimately, I think we both got over it, but we also decided not to share what happened with our wider group of friends. We also didn't go back to the mall for a month or two after that, and when we did go, it was with more of our friends. I'd be lying if I said Cynthia and I weren't paranoid for a couple weeks after that, thinking that Michael would just pop back into our peripheral vision from somewhere. But he never did. I still think about this experience from time to time. I'm not sure if that guy was following us inside of the mall, or if he went directly outside to wait for us or another potential victim. I also don't know what he would have done if he got us alone, and that's not a pleasant thought. Story 3. There's a burger place near where I live called Floyd's Burgers, which I don't think is part of a chain, meaning it's probably just owned by some guy named Floyd. Either way, the food there isn't half bad, but there is a very, shall we say, unique bathroom. One side of it is made up of large two-way mirrors that look out into the main seating area, and to tell the truth, I always feel very weird using it. But after this incident occurred, I refused to use it, and you're about to hear why. It was a Tuesday evening and my wife and I decided to go there for dinner since she didn't want to cook and it was near where we lived. We got there a little after 6, and while it was decently busy, it wasn't super crowded. We made our way through the waiting area, which had those handrails like you'd find in a movie theater or amusement park. My wife and I placed our order, and after the person at the counter gave us our plastic number thing, we found a place to sit. This particular restaurant had longer picnic-style tables, meaning when it was crowded you might have to sit directly next to someone. Luckily there were a couple emptier spaces, and my wife and I sat down next to each other near one corner of the eating area. We both had to use the restroom, and my wife went first. As she had told me, the women's restroom didn't have those two-way mirrors, though I'm not sure that matters for this story. When she got back, I went. The men's restroom had stalls and those divider things between the urinals, which thankfully meant they wouldn't have been directly visible if someone could see in through the outside. I did my business and went to wash my hands, but that's when I saw a man standing on the other side of one of the mirrors. He was skinny and looked to be in his 40s and was wearing a red ball cap, gray t-shirt, and blue jeans. I jumped because it seemed like he was looking right at me, and got freaked out when it appeared he was trying to talk to me. I hurried up and washed my hands and walked outside to see that same man still staring at the window. When I did, he turned to look at me. Had he seen me in there? In addition to being creepy, it was extremely awkward, and I was caught completely off guard. For some strange reason, I said something to the man like, "Big mirrors, huh?" The man, who was still looking at me, laughed this kind of high-pitched laugh, which coupled with the situation was very off-putting. But what he said next was disturbing. "You can kind of see in there." My heart skipped a beat as he said that, and I didn't know how to respond. But before I could respond, the man added, "But I wasn't trying to look at you." My heart was now racing, and I was close to confronting the man, but decided to just walk away back to my seat. As I left, the man told me that he was just trying to give himself a compliment. When I got back, our food had already arrived, and my wife had started eating her burger. I debated about whether or not to tell her about the man, but I started eating my burger too, and just kept eating. 10 or 15 minutes later we were done, and I got up to scrape our tray into the trash can and put it on top. This whole time I'd been periodically checking on that man, who I could still see from where we'd been sitting. He had taken a seat right by that mirror, but appeared to be looking down at the table. I couldn't tell if he had any food in front of him, and it didn't seem like he came with anyone. Either way, I was just glad I didn't have to use the restroom again. Right as I dumped our tray into the trash can, I saw the man get up. I wasn't looking right at him, but instead I was trying to be incognito, and I saw him in my peripheral vision. My heart seemed to sink as he walked over to me, and he actually stopped about 5 feet behind me. I turned around to face him, still not knowing how to handle this encounter. "I promise I wasn't trying to look." At this point, I didn't care about any apology the man cared to make, and I moved past him without saying anything. When I got back to my wife, she asked who that man was, probably assuming it was someone that I knew. I told her I didn't know, but when I turned around, I realized that man was walking towards us. I told my wife we should go, and she didn't ask any questions. The man came up to me again and told me loudly that he wasn't looking, and he even seemed to be becoming upset. I could tell my wife was starting to freak out, and I think I said something like, "Don't worry about it." Apparently the man didn't accept that answer, because he kept following us. Even as we tried to leave, he was literally walking right beside us. He was also starting to make a scene by continuing to apologize to me in a louder and louder voice. When we reached the front doors of the establishment, he was practically yelling, and everyone around us had fallen silent. The spotlight was on us. I think I said, "That's fine, but please leave us alone." But that didn't work either, as the man started shouting, I'm sorry," over and over again. 2 employees came over and tried to calm the man down, but when one of them made the mistake of placing a hand on his shoulder, he batted it off. Then an off-duty police officer, who just happened to be eating there, got up and also tried to de-escalate the situation. At this point, it was completely surreal. Finally, the man stopped shouting and instead began crying. It was clear that he had some serious issues, and after the adrenaline wore off, I actually started to feel sorry for him. My wife and I were still standing there as all this was going on, and now we weren't sure if it was okay for us to walk off or not. I asked the off-duty police officer, and he advised me we could leave, so that's what we did. There isn't really anything after that. I think we went back to that restaurant 2 weeks later, and we still periodically go there, but we've never seen that man again. I guess it really was just a one-off event. Looking back, it wasn't really that scary, just strange. One thing I still don't do is use that bathroom. Luckily, there's a party supply store right next door, and they never care if I use theirs.